the White House, the building inside which Donald Trump, and I feel this isn't mentioned enough, is regularly naked. And just think about that. He might be naked in there right now. Maybe he just sneezed. Maybe there's a Band-Aid somewhere on his person. We don't know, we just know that he's there and we all have to live with that. But while Trump himself is divisive, there are two White House figures who are widely admired, Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump. They're like America's William and Kate, except in this case, both of them are attractive. And many people have praise for them.
The only adults in the room, the moderates, the centrists, frankly, Democrats, are Jared and Ivanka.
You know, thank God his kids are you know, there day to day. They're a positive influence on him.
His best running mate, by the way, would be Ivanka. I don't know that I've met a more composed, brilliant, beautiful in every way person.
Well, that is high praise from Senator Bob Corker. I've never met a more brilliant, beautiful person. I imagine that went down great with his wife and two daughters. Happy Father's Day, Dad. Did Ivanka send you anything? But for Liberals, the popular assumption is that Jared and Ivanka will be moderating influences. Basically, if Trump is thinking about pressing a button labelled Nuke Earth, they will, on behalf of all of us, guide his hand towards the button labelled, hey, maybe don't. And they both have official roles now. Ivanka has recently taken an unpaid position as assistant to the president. And as for Jared, well, he seems to have a hand in basically everything.
He's been planning this week's visit of the Chinese president to Mar-a-Lago, and he's also tasked with brokering peace in the Middle East. The president tapping his son-in-law to reform the criminal justice system, not to mention he's running the new Office of American Innovation, where he's responsible for reforming veteran care, tackling the opioid epidemic, and overseeing the not-so-small feat of revamping the entire federal government.
Holy shit! It is not unusual for powerful men to give their son-in-laws do-nothing jobs. But leave it to Donald Trump, who can't even get nepotism right, to give his a do-everything job. So given the power that they seem to hold, tonight, let's take a look at Jared and Ivanka, and let's set aside the questions surrounding potential conflicts of interest between their business ties and their positions in the administration. And instead, let's focus on answering just two basic questions. Is Ivanka really the moderating influence that people claim? And what in Jared's background justifies such a gigantic White House portfolio? And let's start with Ivanka, Trump's only daughter, except for, and yet somehow including, Tiffany. Now, Ivanka is reassuringly familiar because she's been part of the Trump brand since she was a child. She even co-hosted Trump's Miss Teen USA pageant at age 15, featuring this noticeably odd moment.
Let's go back to Ivanka.
Thanks, Eddie. I can guarantee my brothers were loving that. Are any of you up there single?
Oh, God. Why did they have her say that? Yes, Eddie, my blood relatives are rock hard right now. You heard me, the men with whom I share parents probably have erect penises at this very moment. But in the public drama of the Trump family, Ivanka has been cast as the calm, reasonable, indoor-voiced one, a dynamic that's perhaps best exemplified by this moment.
What's the favorite thing you have in common with your father?
Either real estate or golf.
Donald, with your daughter?
Well, I was going to say sex, but I can't relate that part.
What is wrong with you, you colossal fucking creep? You found the only possible wrong answer to that question. What's your favourite colour? Hitler. But still, that clip actually illustrates a lot of what we like about Ivanka. She's the exact opposite of her dad. He's crazy, she's poised and restrained. And she is impressively on message at all times. Just think about how little information she gave you in that exchange. She was asked, what do you have in common with your dad? And she said, real estate and golf. Those are not personal details. They are core components of the Trump brand that any stranger would associate with him. So, I mean, if you asked Huey, Dewey and Louie what they had in common with their Uncle Donald and they said either feathers or no pants, you would think, wow, the Duck family really doesn't spend a lot of quality time together. And that ability to apparently say nothing and yet consistently support her dad can actually apply to her political views as well. Because the assumption that many of us have that she disagrees with him isn't actually based on much. Just watch her response to being questioned about what they specifically disagree on.
My father agrees with me on so many issues, and where he doesn't, he knows where I stand. But it's not my administration. Can you give us an example
of something that you disagree with him on, and that you think that by speaking up to him, it made him change his position or soften his position?
I think most of the impact I have over time, most people will not actually know about.
Oh, well, that's convenient. So we should just give her credit when good stuff happens and then blame others when bad stuff happens. That's not a job description of a political advisor. That's a description of an Old Testament God. And that answer there enables you to project whatever you want onto her based on second-hand rumours and assumptions, which is exactly what Gayle King and her co-hosts then did.
What is it they differ on? And where do you think she is?
She is not going to share that information. With me, anyway. She's not sharing that information. But that's between her and her dad.
But what do you think?
I think about climate change, certainly. I think about gay rights. I think some of the immigration ban.
Planned Parenthood.
And certainly Planned Parenthood.
Oh, yes, certainly Planned Parenthood as well. Why not? And, you know, those things all feel true, but there is not a lot of evidence. You know, it's the same way that I assume Johnny Depp's penis also has its own miniature hat and goatee. Now, I don't have any concrete evidence that that is actually the case, but come on. Probably, right? Probably. And when you look at what the Trump administration has been doing, it is hard to see much of Ivanka's influence there. Take Planned Parenthood, which she certainly cares about. Well, last week, Donald Trump allowed states to block funds to it, or maybe take climate change. Ivanka did reportedly bring Al Gore to Trump Tower, but unfortunately, just 3 days later, Trump named climate change denialist Scott Pruitt to head the EPA. And maybe that is an example of Ivanka's moderating influence. Maybe Trump's initial choice was a guy strangling a dolphin with a six-pack ring. Although, just out of interest, let's look at an issue that Ivanka has been very outspoken about. Last year at the RNC, she brought up family leave and childcare. And when the Trump campaign released their plan for that, she sold it hard.
We think we've proposed something that's incredibly comprehensive. It's very innovative. It's a bold and fresh solution. There's no policy on Hillary Clinton's website pertaining to any of these issues, childcare, elder care, or maternity leave, or paternity leave for that matter.
Except none of that was remotely true. First, of course, Hillary's site had pages on those issues. So it seems when it comes to lying about easily observable facts, the apple does not fall far from the orange. And let's take a look, though, at that comprehensive, bold, fresh Trump childcare proposal, because according to the Tax Policy Center, very few of its benefits went to the lowest income families. In fact, families with incomes between $10,000 and $30,000 would receive average benefits of just $10 a year. And the only daycare that costs $10 is a padlock. OK, Mommy's going to work and Mrs. Masterlock is going to keep you in your bedroom for the next 8 hours. Thanks, Ivanka, you're the best. And look, you may still like Ivanka. That's fine. She can be appealing, and that's frankly not by accident. She's been trained in the art of Trump branding to be as vague and likeable as possible so that everyone can plausibly think that she shares their values, whether or not that's actually true. And if that sounds like a harsh thing for me to say about her, I will point out she's basically shared that message in one of her books.
Perception is more important than reality. If someone perceives something to be true, it is more important than if it is in fact true. This doesn't mean you should be duplicitous or deceitful, but don't go out of your way to correct a false assumption if it plays to your advantage.
She's pretty much telling you to your face not to trust any assumption that you are making about her. So it is possible that she is doing nothing to moderate her father. And I understand that there is an impulse not to want to think about that. Just like you don't want to think about the fact that it is also possible that in the White House right now, her father may be bowling naked. Yeah, maybe he's wearing bowling shoes. Maybe he's forcing Mike Pence to play alongside him. We don't know. We just have to deal with the fact that it's possible. But the truth is, we may all be thinking that Ivanka is doing a lot more than she actually is, although the same can emphatically not be said for her husband, Jared Kushner, the man, remember, responsible for, among other things, repairing the Middle East, something that his father-in-law is actually pretty confident in.
I have a feeling that Jared is going to do a great job. I have a feeling he's going to do a great job. He is so great. If you can't produce peace in the Middle East, nobody can.
Okay, then nobody can. Or I am wrong, and future history books will say, and peace was finally brought to the Middle East by a sentient Coles mannequin who read a book once. But Jared actually has even more responsibility. He's also reportedly been the primary point of contact for 24 different countries. And if you look at photos of Trump's meetings, it's like, where's Waldo? He's in all of them. When Trump met the leaders of Congress, there he was. At a listening session with business leaders, there he was. At a meeting on cybersecurity, there he was. At a meeting with a Saudi prince, there's Jared. Japanese Prime Minister, boom, it's J-Dog. Chinese president visiting, you got Kushner in the house. Discussing the airstrikes on Syria, where's the Kush? Where's the Kush? There he is! There's the Kush! Basically, Jared is either being invited to every important meeting or he died in the White House in the late 1800s and he has been haunting it ever since. Jared's portfolio would be unmanageable for the smartest man on Earth. So, is Jared Kushner the smartest man on Earth? We already know that he's the coolest. He can really rock a trill pair of sunnies. But what is going on behind them?
This guy can be quiet but confident, and as it was described to me, he is a visionary.
If you have meetings with Jared Kushner, Jared listens, he doesn't talk that much, he absorbs it.
I see Jared as like the Alexander Hamilton of the new administration. He's super thoughtful. Okay. He's a 3 times listener, 0.5% talker.
Stop. So hold on, he is brilliant because he's quiet. Just because you don't talk does not necessarily mean you're thinking something amazing. It can just mean that you're sitting in a meeting, staring blankly at people's moving lips, thinking about why baby cats aren't called cattens. Or whether all goldfish might have peanut allergies, but since they don't ever eat peanuts, we'll just never know. And that whole 0.5% talker thing does point to something genuinely odd about Jared, because for someone with the amount of power that he has, have you ever heard him speak? Seriously, what does his voice sound like? You don't know, do you? And look, it wasn't easy, but we did actually manage to find an interview of him talking on TV in 2009, and here it is.
My main business is real estate, and I also own a newspaper and some other websites and online media businesses. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, hold on, you just took that clip and you dubbed in Gilbert Gottfried, but you don't know that for sure. Listen to it again. My main business is real estate, and I also own a newspaper and some other websites and online media businesses.
You don't know for a fact that that is not his actual voice, and that is the real point. So in the absence of Jared's spoken thoughts, we've instead had to rely on second-hand evidence of his brilliance, and the first thing many people cite is his education.
Jared is a great young man, went to Harvard, very smart.
He went to Harvard.
Jared is he's a #1 at Harvard guy. He's incredibly smart.
Yes, but that's not really evidence of anything. The Unabomber went to Harvard. Ted Cruz went to Harvard. And yes, plenty of smart people went there too. They'll tell you about it. But it is worth noting that officials at Jared's high school were reportedly dismayed he got in because, as one put it, his GPA did not warrant it, his SAT scores did not warrant it. So who knows how he pulled that off? I'm sure it's absolutely nothing to do with the fact that his father pledged $2.5 million to the school shortly before he was admitted, and I'm certainly not saying that that is a textbook case of paying for admission. I'll leave that to the textbook The Price of Admission, in which that story actually appears. But the point is, however Jared got in, after graduating, he took over his father's real estate business after his dad, Charlie, was sent to prison. And I don't have time to get into why. Let me just say, it involves blackmailing his brother-in-law, a sex worker, and a hidden camera in an alarm clock in a shitbox motel on Route 22 called the Red Bull. The Red Bull Inn. The whole story, I promise, is amazing. Trust me, it is worth a Google. You're going to need the safe search off. But how has Jared run the family business? Well, he made a big splash when he bought 666 Fifth Avenue for a record $1.8 billion in 2007. But that deal has not been a raging success.
The entire deal was a miscalculation.
They had absolutely paid too much at the time. He bought at the very top of the market. So then the market turned.
10 years later, the building is struggling to cover its debt payments.
OK, so Kushner's purchase did make a splash, but it turned out to be more the kind of splash your phone makes when it falls into the toilet. Now, that building is obviously not Jared's whole record in business. He also owned the New York Observer, which even the paper's staff found a little odd, given that several people described him as an unenthusiastic reader with little use for newspapers, let alone books. He also recently spearheaded a Brooklyn development called Dumbo Heights, and one of his partners praised his involvement there, saying he's very uncluttered in his mind. I think that simplicity allows him to filter some things out, which could be a compliment or a savage insult. And to give you a flavour of what Jared's vision for Dumbo Heights is, I'd like you to watch a video that he showed to a real estate conference, which is the most infuriating combination of meaningless tech nonsense and stock footage of models pretending to conduct business that you will ever see.
Dumbo Heights, a dynamic space mechanically engineered for optimum performance and unrivaled connectivity. This campus is the staging ground for the next generation of innovators and creators. Change is forged on this campus in the fire of great thinkers and visionaries. A community built for collaboration. When innovation is cultivated, the world rises to meet.
Dope. You know, it's hard to pick. It's hard to pick, but I think my favourite phrase in there is actually bragging that the development is mechanically engineered. Because what are the other options there? How many office buildings are naturally occurring or created with a wish on a genie's lamp? And if you are starting to get concerned that Jared's business record may not qualify him for his current jobs, I should point out one other prominent item that is on his resume, the 2016 election. A few weeks after it was over, Forbes ran a cover story titled "This Guy Got Trump Elected," which does sound impressive. And it features quotes from Jared like, "We played Moneyball, asking ourselves which states will get the best ROI for the electoral vote," which is a sentence that can only be forged in the uncluttered mind of the Wizard of Dumbo Heights. But in fairness, the article does give some examples of what specific technical expertise Jared may have brought into the operation.
They used targeting. They found a way to get people on Facebook and Twitter, and they evolved into this 100-person secret data center down in San Antonio, and they had data do everything. Data determined his schedule, his rallies, even what he spoke about in the rallies. So they knew.
Even what he spoke about at the rallies?
Yes.
Really? Data determined what Trump spoke about at his rallies. Look, I don't doubt that there were 100 people in a basement somewhere money-balling the ROI, but I would love to see the data that recommended this.
I love these boards. Look, here's a beauty. Here's a beauty. I love charts. I love charts. And I always said, you know, it's too tough putting a screen up. You got to get guys, cost too much money. I don't like to spend money. This is a cheap version of a screen, okay? It's just as good. But you need good, strong hands. So look, you ready? So there it is.
Thanks, Jared. You really mechanically engineered the shit out of that one. But you know what? Trump did win the election, and I wasn't there. So who knows? Maybe Jared is single-handedly responsible for the entire victory. But that still doesn't mean he has the specific knowledge to tackle government reform, or the Middle East, or the opioids epidemic. Can somebody please reassure me that this is okay?
Jared is incredibly smart, very talented, has enormous capacity. He is humble in the recognition of what he doesn't know, and is tremendously secure in his ability to seek informed viewpoints.
No, not you. Not you. I know your game now, not you. And also, to that point that he will seek informed viewpoints, that will be harder since there are still hundreds of key jobs across the government that Trump has not yet named nominees for, some agencies central to Jared's duties, including the Department of Transportation, the DEA, and the VA. It is too bad that Trump can't appoint someone to nominate people on his behalf, although even then, I am pretty sure that he'd give that job to Jared fucking Kushner. And yet the truth is, for many people, the main thing qualifying Jared for his positions is not so much who he is, but who he isn't.
As many questions I have about Jared and Ivanka and their qualifications,
They're a lot more qualified than people like Steve Bannon.
I, like everybody, would prefer to have them rather than Mr. Bannon involved in decisions.
Is he James Baker? No, he's not James Baker.
The answer is no.
But is he Steve Bannon? No, he's not Steve Bannon.
All right, that is true. Jared Kushner is not Steve Bannon, but that is a low bar. That recommendation would get you no other job. We shouldn't be excited about a top White House advisor simply because he is preferable to a man best described as every dark thought humanity has ever had, inhabiting the long-dead corpse of a Civil War-era plantation owner that even his fellow plantation owners called a bit much. There has to be a third option here, and even some people who know Jared and like him have some serious questions.
I know Jared Kushner and Ivanka. They lived in my building. They're lovely young people. Does this person have any qualifications? Lovely guy. I'm sure level-headed. Yes, he's temperamentally sane versus the president. Got it. Having said that, what has this guy done in his life ever?
Just listen to what he just said. Lovely young man, seems level-headed, what's he done? It does not bode well that Jared Kushner's neighbours describe him like he just got arrested for murdering 11 people. And look, in the end, this isn't even Jared's fault. It's the fault of the guy who appointed him. Because think about it this way. Imagine anyone other than Donald Trump was president. And hold that thought. It's nice, right? In fact, imagine this stock photo guy was in office, this guy, and he said, hey, everyone, I'm going to fix the Middle East and opioids and the whole of government in general, and I found the perfect person to do it. It's this creepily silent 36-year-old heir to a real estate fortune. What does everyone think? You would justifiably be fucking upset at that. And I know that all of this may seem like an evisceration of both Jared and Ivanka, but it is really not. I don't know enough about them to eviscerate them, just as you don't know enough about them to justify putting any real hopes in them. Because it is dangerous to think of them as a moderating influence, as reassuring as that may feel. Because believe me, and it gives me no pleasure to say this, if they are the reason you are sleeping at night, you should probably still be awake. And if you need help doing that, simply remember, Donald Trump may currently be airing out his balls in the Lincoln bedroom. Sweet dreams.